All right, folks, so this is part two of chapter 9, Guided Program Development. This will be where we jump into add the coding to our Moonbeam glamping web application. So let's get started. I still have Visual Studio open. I was doing some poking around and I found a couple errors in here. So I'll show you how to fix them if you experience the errors as well. I didn't, when I finished the last video, I didn't run the application to see how it was working. When I ran it after I finished the video, there was an error. I did some Googling and I found out, at least on my laptop, there's an issue with the version of the framework and this version of ASP.NET. You have to add a line to the web config file. If you are getting errors, and we can talk about this when you guys are working it on a class, if you're getting errors when you're running the application, you could be having the same thing. So if you double click on this web config file, and what I had to add in is these three lines of code. So this kind of looks like HTML. It's really XML. So you add an app settings tag here, and inside add space key, and then validate settings, unobtrusive validation mode, value equals none, and then close it, and then close app settings, and that should resolve that issue that I was having. You may not have it. If you do, this is probably what it is. The other thing that I did is I went into this registration page here, right-clicked on it, and set it as start page, just so this starts up. I was getting a weird error, so that resulted as well. So if you're getting errors, there's a couple things you might have to do when you're dealing with web apps. Things can get a little hokey here and there because the app isn't meant to run on a desktop browser. It's running not running on a desktop, it's running in a browser. So there's a few things you have to deal with. So that's pretty much it for that. So let's go in, double click on our submit button, and this should look familiar to you. I'm just going to delete these two lines of code here because I think I accidentally clicked on the checkbox in the page load. We don't need the page load here. So we're going to go in first and, oops, I don't want to do that. Up here, we're going to enter our comments. So project is Moonbeam glamping online reservation form. And then we have author. King. Date is 2/23/2022. And the purpose of this program, the book has a very long purpose for this comment. I am going to abbreviate it. I'm going to say request reservation information. And compute cost for number of minutes and intent selected. Okay. Good. So that's good for our comments. we're going to go into our submit button, and we're going to declare our variables. So just like the rest of our apps, we have some variables here. So, and this is all going to look very familiar to you. We're going to set a couple variables for our cost of our 3/10. In previous apps, we've done these as constants. The book isn't doing them as constants this time. You could. I'm just going to follow along with the book. We could declare them as constants. Doesn't really matter in this app for now. So our first variable is going to be this. Cost. That's decimal. And that is $90 a night. Polar cost. And that looks like it's actually, this was 99, not 90. And this is 89. And then we have Kodak cost is 79. Thing that you guys will notice as you get older is your eyesight isn't as good. So the little text in these books is sometimes hard for me to read. So 79 and force it as a decimal. And then we have a variable for our name. So that is going to be string name, string, not stack. Okay, and then string email. And then our tent cost. And they're going to initialize this as 0. And then message. Okay. So step sign and variables. Really not going to be doing any conversion here. We're just going to get our name and our email address from the text boxes. But we're going to do something a little different on this one is we're going to use, and we talked about this in the in the presentation video, we're going to use a trim function so that if a user accidentally added an extra space to the end or to the beginning, we're going to trim that off when we send it over to the web server. And that's important when you're dealing with web applications. So, string name equal to txt name.text.trim. So simple as that. It's part of the string function, so we can just do a dot trim, and that's going to trim everything extra before or after what's in the text box and put it in a variable so we don't have anything in there. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with emails. Email equals text email.text.trim. Okay. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to set that reservation text box or reservation label that we put over there to blank so that there's no placeholder in there. So set, say, clear reservation. So reservations.text. Set blank. And then we're going to do a little bit of validation here. So we're going to check. Check if the user has selected attempt, because if they haven't selected attempt, then it doesn't make sense to do anything else from here. So we're going to say if not, and we're going to do a little bit of logical operations here. So we're going to say chk grizzly dot checked or check polar. Oh. Check polar dot checked or Kodiak checked. Really having a problem with this. Put our end if in here, and we're going to have an else in here too. So put that in there for now. So if those three check boxes are not checked, then what we want to do is display our tent error label. So we're going to say LBL tent error dot visible is equal to true. . And then we also want to check more validation here. Check if arrival date is valid. So we're doing another check here just to kind of tell it. So if they haven't checked a tent, they really can't go any further. But we're also going to go and make sure that they've selected an arrival date too, just to make sure they'll get the error for that. Both errors if they didn't select anything for that one as well. So we're going to say if CLD calendar arrival dot selected date is less than the arrival. And cool thing is we've got some built-in functions with this calendar. So we can say today's date. So if the arrival date is less than today's date, so you can't book anything in the past, basically. Then LBL calendar error dot visible equals true, else LBL calendar error dot visible equals false. All right. So if they selected a date less than today, we're going to display the calendar error. If not, we're going to make that calendar error label visible equals false. Okay, so we've got that. Now we're going to jump down to our else here. So this is all the code we need in here. So I'll extra space at the end. Else. So this is when we're actually going to be doing our code. So this if was for errors, and now we're going to display all our code. So the first thing we want to do is make sure our tent error is not visible. So LBL tent error dot visible false. The reason you set these all first is because if the user's running this multiple times, you want to make sure that something's not visible from the previous time. Okay, so now we're gonna have to check again if the arrival date is valid. So if say check if arrival date is valid. So we're going to say if CLD arrival dot selected date is greater than or equal to CLD arrival today's date. I guess we're doing greater than or equal to on this one because you can book something for today. So I guess normally probably wouldn't do that, but I guess we're allowing that. Then, so if the arrival selected date is greater than today, then we're going to calculate the cost. But the first thing we need to do is make sure our calendar error is visible. It's not visible. So LBL calendar error, because we know we have a valid date and it could be visible from a previous error. Okay. So now I write another if statement. So we're going to say if CHK Grizzly. So if Grizzly's checked, then set our desk tent cost. And we're just going to do a plus equal, add this Grizzly cost. Okay, so all we're doing is adding our Grizzly cost from up here to that tent cost, which right now is 0, but now if they selected Grizzly, we're going to add that cost. Now remember, they can select more than one tent. They could rent 3 tents. So we may need to, if they've selected more than one, add a few of these costs to the tent cost. That's why we're doing this. And this is just shorthand for doing it. There are other ways we could write this. Okay. So then we're going to have 2 more if statements for Polar and Kodiak. So rather than typing this all out, oops, I didn't want to do that. I have to copy that. Control C. That was interesting. Control B. So this is going to be Polar. And this is going to be Polar cost. And this is going to be Kodiak. Feel free to copy and paste to save yourself a little time. I'm not the fastest typer, so I will often copy code if I'm doing similar code like this. Okay. So now we have int number of nights. We want to grab that from our dropdown. Int number of nights equal to convert. Now, int number of nights is currently a string because it's in a drop-down box. So we've got to convert it to an integer. So we're going to convert. That's not what I wanted. Convert dot to 32. And then DDL nights dot selected item dot text. Oops. Text. So we grab the drop-down list object, the selected item. So the item that the user selected in the drop-down would grab the text value from it. So just like we would in a text box. So that's going to get that selected item into the int number of nights variable. And we don't have to worry about validation on that because I can only select the value from the drop-down. We're going to do our final calculation. We'll put a little in there for that. Cost. And so we're going to say this tent cost is equal to the number of nights times this tent cost. And the last thing we need to do is display our big long message with their reservation in there. And this is going to be a little bit of typing here. So we're going to put a comment in here. Set or it will set reservation message. Okay, so say string message is equal to, and this is going to be a lot of lines of code, so we're going to do some line continuation stuff in here. String message is equal to say a reservation has been made for and we'll put a space in there, and this is where we have to add some HTML in here. So we're going to add an ampersand and then do a break. So in quotes here, we're going to put R for a line break, because remember, this is all HTML. So we can actually put HTML in our text here. And then the code here is telling me to put an underscore. That's just a line continuation. It seems to be loading it. So that is just a line continuation. I don't know if I really need to put that in there, but the book is telling me to put it in there, so I'm going to put it in there just so we don't get an error. So this is used for if you're continuing a line of code onto another line. So usually when you hit enter, it ends it. Like I said, I don't think I really need it because this is the only place. Well, they're using it in a couple of places, so I'm going to follow the code in the book. But I really don't think I need it, but we'll put it in there just so we don't get any errors just in case. So then we put another ampersand in here. So a reservation has been made for, and we're going to put our name. So string name. Ampersand. And then another break. And we need that break in quotes. another %. Email. %. A lot of concatenation here. String email. So we're just kind of putting labels in here, and then the text that the user entered, just kind of have a confirmation of what they booked. And %. And then we're going to put another break in. So we're providing text. Okay. So now, all right, see what they're doing here. String message, and we're going to concatenate the previous message onto our existing message. Probably easier ways to do this, but that's okay. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do an and equal. Oops, and that's just going to concatenate whatever we put after it to whatever was in there before. So it's just like a plus equal or a times equal, although it's giving me an error here. Oh, it's because I don't need the first equal. So string message and equal. We're going to say oops, I need a quote here. The tent cost is these continuation characters again. Another and %. Let's say des tent cost. Dot to string. And currency. Again, this should be very familiar to you. We've done this all along. And then another break. And then we're going to do our arrival date. And continuation. And %. So CLD arrival. Selected date. And then we're going to have to do a conversion, and we're going to say to short date string. So if I back over this, you'll see there's long date string, there's long date time string, there's universal time. So there's all kinds of different ways you can format it. So if I did a long date string, it would display the date in words. So January spelled out, 5th, comma, and the year. So short is just going to do the numbers. So you can play around with those different ways to format dates if you want to, but we're going to keep it simple and just keep it to date short string. functions, parentheses at the end. And it looks like we need another line continuation here. And then and another line break. Four. And number of nights. And whew, that was a lot of work. So it looks like I have that all in there. That's good. So it's going to say a reservation has been made for the name you put in, email, the email address, the tent cost is, and it's going to display the tent cost, and it's going to display the arrival date for this number of nights. So let's hope that this comes out right when we display it. So now we have to display the label, or actually put that string in the label. So label reservation.text. And we're going to set that equal to string message. And then we have an else in here. And this is the else from the if up here in the calendar. So we say we want to make the calendar error visible equal true. So calendar error dot visible is equal to true. All right. So I think that is it. So we got our comments. Code a little, make sure I don't have too many extra spaces in here. I could probably put some comments for each one of these. Oops. That's fine. This is self-explanatory on our if statements. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. See if it doesn't blow up on us. I wouldn't be totally surprised if it didn't, but let's see what happens. Look at that. So we've got our page, our calendar, a number of nights. So let's try it out. King, email address. Oh. Kept my email address in here. I'm going to select just one of these and 2 nights. And I'm going to book something for this weekend. Hit submit. Look at that. So a reservation has been made for Stephen King. Email address, the tent cost is $198. So I did 2 nights, so it's 2 times 99, which is 198. Our arrival date is 2/26. And we're staying for 2 nights. So I got a little error in here. I need a space between the 2 and the nights, so we can go back and fix that pretty easily. So that is good. So I'm just going to close my browser window and go back into here and put a space there. So let's do a little testing on it. Let's see what happens if I don't enter a name, okay, or enter an invalid email address, okay. So we get an error here that says error in email format. Let's hit submit without selecting tent selection and see what happens. So it gives me an error here for enter name. I didn't get an error on my tent selection, but that's a little weird. Let's try selecting a date in the past and see what happens. Let's put something in here and see if we get an error. So I still got an error in my email format. So let's select an email address. And select a date in the past. Okay, so we're getting this error now. Select a valid date if we didn't actually select a date. I want to do something else to make our errors a little more visible. I think what I want to do, and there's a couple ways to do that, is make the text of these red. I think this is red. That's not red. That's red. Okay. So I think that didn't work. Usually you can select things from up here. So apparently you can't. Let's make our 4 color here red. Good. And we're going to do that to all of these. Make our 4 color. So that way when we get an error, it's easier for the end user to see that. And again, this is a little hokey to go into each one of these and change them, but that's what they pay us the big bucks for. We'll do the same thing with this one. And you can poke around with all these properties and change things and format things. I'm not going to spend too much time on formatting. I changed the font of this right here, but I didn't change the font on these. So when you guys are doing your apps, if you want to make the UI more appealing, feel free to do that. All right, so let's just see what happens. I'm going to maximize this. I'll put a name in, but I'll put an invalid email address. So now that comes up in red. So I think it's a little easier to see. So I think that's about it. We'll select all 3 of these and we'll say 5 nights, and then we'll do it for the 25th. Submit. Oh, I didn't fix my email address, so we know the validation is working. Let's submit this. Good. So this is pretty fast. When I click the submit button, I've seen web apps that it takes a little while when you hit the submit. If you're dealing with a web server, the web server that we're dealing with is on this computer, so it's pretty quick. But if you're dealing with a web server that's across the country or across the world, it could take 30 seconds or longer for this to come back. So that's why you want all the validation to happen here and not server side. So I think this is it for our coding on this one. That wasn't too bad. I'm going to go ahead and save all to make sure this is saved. And that's it. I'll talk to you guys later.